Hi, I'm Neil Bierbaum, and today I'm going to show you that there are 5 motivational states, 3 that are good for you and 2 that are not. I'm also going to show you how and why we spend too much time in those unhealthy ones and what you can do about it. But be careful, because if you watch through to the end, you'll learn things that mean you can never lie on the couch making excuses ever again. Let me kick off by pointing out that I'm starting this channel with a series on motivation, not because I want to be known as the motivation guy, but because I want to share with you some principles that lie at the heart of everything I teach and, believe it or not, everything it means to be a human and to live a productive, meaningful life. If you stay with me over time, you'll hear me refer back to these principles and you'll get to see how important these fundamentals are. Now, I'm a leadership and life coach, and in the days before actual coaching, the only option we had for getting people motivated were those dreaded motivational speakers. There was no social media back then, so you only encountered them live at a workshop that you paid for or when your company hired them. I don't know if there's anybody watching who's old enough to remember that. They whooped onto the stage and spewed out platitudes like, "Today is a gift, that's why we call it the present," and then disappeared into the ether. Unless you were a total cynic, their message of hope did rev you up for a few days, but soon you and everyone else went back to your normal human state, which is waiting for Friday. Then coaching became a thing and quickly earned a reputation for being much more effective as an approach to getting people authentically motivated. And why? Because it happened one-on-one and it connected people to a goal that meant something to them. In many ways, you could say that coaching brought the ocean of whatever those motivational speakers were drinking and distilled it into little plastic water bottles of hope, insight, and whatever else was needed to get people feeling inspired. So while coaching is about much more, at the heart of it is motivation. In my work as a coach, combined with my reading of a number of scientific studies, I've identified a set of 5 motivational states, which are independent of your moods or emotions. And as you'll discover, that's what makes them so effective. Because the worst thing you can do when it comes to getting motivated is to wait until you feel like it. It's got to hinge on something else, and I'm going to show you what that something else is. The 5 states are presented here in descending order of the levels of visible activity and exertion normally associated with them, and then I'll go through them in more detail. At the top we get agitation. That's when we are using force, pushing too hard. Then we get the ideal state, which is the state of flow, which is that state of enjoyment where we become totally absorbed in the activity and we lose the sense of time. The next level is animation. That's when we start to get going. When we get up off the couch and we have to push ourselves a little bit, we're not quite in the flow state. It takes a little bit of effort, mental effort, to get going. Then we have the state of rest, which is active relaxation, deliberate state of rest for recovery. And then we get the state of ennui. I used to think it was called ennui, but I've discovered it's pronounced ennui, which is that state of bored, flat, resistant state that we find ourselves in on a Sunday afternoon. So let's unpack those in more detail, and we'll do this in a slightly different order, one that better facilitates their explanation. First, we'll look at the healthy states. The state of flow. So think about those times when you're doing something you love, like your favorite hobby. If you're a musician, it's when you're in the groove, or for those exercise bunnies, it's when you're hitting those peak performance levels. In those moments, you lose track of time, forget all your worries, and feel exhilarated. The psychologist and researcher Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi defined this as being the flow state, or the state of optimal experience. And he noted that the factors that are present and which are needed for you to get into that state are under your conscious control. Importantly, they are action-related and not dependent on whatever mood you're in when you start out. Then we get the state of rest. After a good bit of activity, even if you've been in the flow state, you're going to want to rest. More to the point, you need to rest, which is something we often forget. Rest is good and necessary when it's deliberate, consciously chosen rest for the sake of recovery after a period of exertion. Then we get the state of animation. That's where you start out with an activity, even one that you enjoy, and you often don't feel like it in the beginning. Those first 10 minutes when you're on your run, for example, or when you have to get up off the couch to start work on that project, it feels like a huge effort, at least until you get going. I call this the state of animation. It's that state of active engagement, the phase of getting going, when you're making the effort even though you don't feel like it. Now we get to the unhealthy states. First, ennui. If you remain in the state of rest for too long, and often we do, because why? We think that if something is good for you, then more must be better, then you're likely to drop down into the state of ennui or boredom. That's like on a Sunday afternoon, or when you're into your second week of holiday and you've been lying around doing nothing. You don't really feel like getting going for anything, do you? So ennui becomes a self-reinforcing, self-destructive spiral. Then, of course, there are those times when you're pushing too hard to make things happen. You're trying to do more or force things to happen faster than reality will allow. The analogy for this would be when you're stuck in traffic and it's not going to shift for you, no matter how much you scream and shout, hoot, honk your horn, try to change lanes, get angry, irritable, frustrated. We'll call that the state of agitation. So that ideal state, the state of flow, has been extensively studied scientifically and reported on. The guy I mentioned earlier, Csikszentmihalyi, was the leading researcher on this. And that state is attainable, he discovered, when the right conditions of action are met. In other words, it's more about how you do an activity than it is about choosing the right activity or feeling like it when you start out. In short, you want to be reasonably challenged in terms of your skill levels. You want to be mindful in your approach to the activity, and the outcome and the activity itself should matter to you, and it can matter to you in different ways. Going for a run, for example, might matter to you because you want to get fit for a certain purpose. You want to have a beach bod for the summer, whatever it happens to be. The flow state cannot be sustained indefinitely through any one activity, so you need to, I like to say, leave at the peak of the party and switch to another activity. Otherwise, you'll get tired, you'll get bored, and eventually, at some time, you need to rest. Rest is quite unpopular in this day and age. Sleep when you die is kind of the motto that you hear. However, you do need rest. Your body and your doctor will tell you that. However, as with most things, as I said, just because something is good for you, it doesn't mean that more is better. Think alcohol, think coffee. Same with rest. With too much rest, you slip down into that flat, bored, listless state, which I've chosen to call ennui, this model. And usually when you're in that state, the last thing you feel like doing is, well, anything. If you're lying on the couch, you don't feel like getting up to get a drink, even though you're thirsty, or couldn't be bothered to fetch a snack, even though you're hungry. Often what you're hoping for when you're in that state is that you'll somehow magically be transported into this state of flow. However, if you read the science, the state of flow is never achieved when there is no challenge. So lying on the couch, lazing around, watching TV, scrolling is never going to deliver that optimal state. The path, and the only path to the flow state, is through the state of animation. That state of getting motivated, that phase where you pick yourself up off the couch and start doing stuff. When you sit down and open your laptop on a Sunday afternoon to prepare for work on Monday. When you put on your kit and you head out for that run despite feeling all stiff and sore. If you think about any of those, 10 minutes in, you're usually starting to get into it. You read an email that annoys you, and before you know it, you're getting into that flow state. Same with going for that run. You realize you've made it to that first marker at a pretty good time. Suddenly, you're into it, and you're getting motivated. An important thing to note about the state of animation is that it's most often activated by an external trigger. For example, your boss has just messaged, so you know they're done with their meeting. Better get that email out before they get back. And that's the reason why many people have a personal trainer at the gym, because it's that external trigger, the obligation, that gets them there. Ideally, what we'd want to get to is the point where animation is activated by an internal trigger. So when you decide to shift your own lazy ass and get yourself to gym, and you do it simply because you decided, because you said so, that is a much more productive and effective way of operating. I'm sure you'll agree. And then just to recap on the state of agitation, that is achieved when you're trying too hard or you're impatient to get something done, maybe so you can return to the couch. It can also arise when you're trying to control outcomes or control the way things are being done. A good analogy, as I've mentioned, is when you're stuck in traffic and you can't really do anything about it. What you want to do there is drop back a little bit, sit back and let things be, tune into some music or an audiobook or make a phone call. The same happens in sport. It's another good analogy is, when, let's say when people are playing tennis and they're in the zone, That's the flow state. And then one of them thinks that they have to make something happen, so they become agitated. They rise up into the agitated state, they force the shot, and the rally breaks down and they lose the point. So sports people are trained to recognize when they're getting into that agitated state and drop back into the flow state. That's what we want to become aware of and what we want to start doing. If we spend too much time in the state of agitation, that's where we start to experience life as stressful. We start to get all those stress-related mental and physical ailments, burnout, and so on. So as you can see, the state of flow, the state of rest, and the state of animation are the positive states. That's the healthy zone. Those states are good for you, and you want to be moving between them consciously and deliberately. Ideally, you want to exit the state of rest and get into that animated state before you drop down into ennui. Similarly, you want to remain mindfully present and equanimous when you're in the animated state, because that's what's going to carry you forward into the flow state. And you want to remain aware of when you start pushing too hard and find yourself in that agitation state, and you want to drop back from that. Take your foot off the gas. Whatever's driving you at that point, it probably won't be the end of the world if it doesn't happen in the way that you currently say it should. In future episodes in this series, I'll be breaking these down and dealing with them in more detail, how to monitor your motivational states and how to apply them in different contexts. For now, if you want to do more research, you can explore the personal effectiveness books on my Amazon author page, sign up for an online self-coaching course, or inquire about one-on-one coaching. All the links are below. So thank you. If you found value from this, please remember to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.